I want to talk about warrior energy. And by warrior energy, I mean that pure dynamic energy. Sometimes you could describe it as active or yang energy versus yin, or masculine energy, and not masculine or feminine or whatever gender body as much as the energy and that dynamic energy, the yang energy versus the yin. So warrior energy was developed in cultures like the samurai culture and in China and in India and the Native American, and it was largely developed to like keep your people safe and to be strong so people could be safe and so cultures could flourish. And in our contemporary world, it's been directed in other ways. We're more individualistic, and it can be about kind of making things happen in your life, and that can be a very positive thing, And I can tell you a little bit of my own history that I've gone through. And when I was in my early 20s and I started studying with my spiritual teacher at the time, it became evident, and he kind of pointed out to me that my childhood had left me somewhat passive. Passive in that I didn't take charge of my life. I kind of allowed things to happen and allowed other people to determine my life. And there was real value in like learning how to create my own life and to make things happen in my own life. And it was really a powerful time. I started a business, I bought a house. In my relationships, I got stronger, and it was really valuable to develop this, and I was working on my issues and doing ceremony and doing high ceremony and doing vision quests, and that energy was really, really helpful. That warrior energy took me a long way. And that was all great until maybe 10, 15 years later, my teacher sat me down and said, okay, you got that down. You know how to create things. You created your business. You created your life. Now I want to teach you a new way to create things. And you've heard me talk about this, where I call it collaborative creation. So you put an intention out, okay, and then you invite spirit or life or, the universe to kind of create these things collaboratively. So you're not taking a specific outcome and forcing it into existence. You're kind of getting the idea of you're creating an intention, and then you're allowing it to unfold. And so that was different and has been a lifelong challenge since then on how to really work with that, And so for a while there, this warrior energy, almost I kind of associated it with forcing things to happen, And so it was like, okay, I'm learning not to force things to happen, okay? And so the warrior energy and the make it happen thing and the directing my energy to outside of my things outside of myself became kind of something that maybe I needed to not do as much. And it turned out I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, because it wasn't the warrior energy that was the problem. It wasn't that dynamic energy that's like part of me and part of us that was the problem. It was the way I was directing it. It was the intention of the energy, And so the idea hit me somewhere along the way. It's like, well, perhaps I could learn to redirect my warrior energy, my dynamic energy. And so when we're creating things, it's like less directed into making an outcome happen, a static outcome that I envision, and forcing things to happen. And like I have that push energy, push. I would keep pushing to make things happen. And it's like less of that. And I can take that energy, I can put it more into the intention, the initiation and the creation in the intention, and put it into that energy. And then it also, I've found is very useful on a spiritual path, because, as you've probably noticed, a spiritual path is not for the meek of heart. You're challenging fear, and you're going into the unknown, and you're letting here, you're changing your belief systems and your reality, and you're challenging fear a lot, and it takes some tenacity to kind of do this. And so we can direct this warrior energy, almost more internally in towards ourself, toward our fear, not in a destructive way, but we can challenge our fear, and we can, challenge our comfort zone and learn to step outside of our comfort zone, and that's how I've been using it a lot. In that I'm in a new town and I don't know people, and I'm doing different things that I'm not necessarily very good at, and it's way out of my comfort zone. So I can channel that warrior energy into that. And then, the spiritual path also, it's very challenging. And you may have noticed, like, some days the dragon wins, like some days we get discouraged, and some days we fail, or we don't, or we don't get the outcome that we want, and we get discouraged. And so this warrior energy is this, like, brush yourself off and get up and learn to go, learn to fight another day, and that warrior energy can be so useful, but I'm directing it in a different way. The I Ching, the oldest book on the planet, it's a Taoist or really early Zen book of, a book of changes, it's called. And it's a divination. It's a book of divination too. You can ask it questions, but the I Ching has this thing of, I forget which change line it is, but it's about marshaling your armies against yourself. Okay. And now that's not in a destructive way. Like, sometimes we shouldn't marshal our negative energy towards ourselves. Our destructive energy, we should not marshal that. But this warrior energy, it's like marshaling it towards yourself rather than outside and forcing things to happen. I can marshal my armies and my warrior energy against my, into myself, and challenge my fear and my inhibition and my old belief systems and my belief that I'm not worthy. And then when I'm reforging my life and, like, kind of recreating my life, I can really rely on that energy. And so then the energy is the same, but I'm directing it in a new way. And so for a while, when I was doing this new way of creating things, of creating an intention and allowing things to unfold, I kind of almost reverted back into that, I guess I could call it wimpy. It was kind of a little softer, and that was fine. But what I found is that I can still have that dynamic energy. And now it may format itself different in a male body than a female body, but it's still that same energy. And so now it's like, how can I'm really working with utilizing that and directing that in a new way. And it's less towards making things happen and imposing my will and forcing things, and more on creating an intention and challenging myself and getting myself to get up and fight another day. So anyway, that is my video for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome week, and maybe just observe, or maybe even do a little inquiry, a little spiritual inquiry about your dynamic energy, about your warrior energy, and then think about, in your new life, in your life and the things you want to create, how can you direct or redirect that warrior energy to help you create the life that you would like to have for yourself. And I will see you in a week.